Hey guys, EST here with another video with critical information that you might need if you find yourself in a long-term grid down, society down type of situation. And this could even be purely economic. You could just do this right now to save money or anything in between. How do you make your own fertilizer, or at least get some sort of functional soil treatment that will let your garden and your crops grow if you need to grow your own food? So first of all, go look at my video on what you should grow. But the short version is potatoes, beans, and carrots. They're the easiest, mixed with the highest amount of calories. Not much else really gets close, but obviously corn. But man, you are not growing corn without nitrogen-heavy fertilizer. Now beans, they actually put nitrogen back into the soil. They grab most of what they need from the air. Good to know, but everything sprouts up a little bit faster with the perfect soil. Now, I say perfect soil because I want to reference that specifically. Farmers and expert gardeners talk about like yields and percentages and like, oh, return on investment and, oh, I went up 4% of my yield because of this, that, or the other thing. In an emergency scenario, just something is better than nothing. You got to focus more on like pest and disease and taking care of that, getting rid of weeds, getting rid of competition, keeping the pests out, and really just make the area slightly bigger if you want a higher yield. That's so much easier than getting the exact pH and mix and like, oh, I need potassium, but I also need nitrogen. Remember, farmers have a finite amount of space. You do not. But what even is fertilizer? I would personally put it in about 5 categories. So one is nitrogen. That's the easy one. Everybody thinks of it. It's early growth, new growth, big leaves, springtime. Now that's the N in the NPK rating, and it's the first number in the sequence of 3 numbers, same thing, on any modern fertilizer. So P is phosphorus. That's root development. So, you know, that helps it grab even more nutrients, soak up water from the soil, stay stable in the wind. Also really important early on. Then you got K, which is potassium. It's not K because they already had a P, it's K because in Latin it was called kalium. That's just kind of the all-around overall health of the plant. It makes it tough, it makes it healthy, and pests will, like, by their very nature, tend to attack things that are unhealthy. Because if they leave the healthy plants alone, then they make more plants for them to attack later. There are pests that'll take out everything. Spider mites, locusts, I mean, I can name all kinds of stuff. But a healthy plant is going to be a lot more resistant to like powdery mildew and that type of thing. So then you got your trace elements, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, that kind of stuff. It makes the vegetables or even fruit more nutritious to the human, obviously. So, you know, iron in the soil, that's very good because, you know, people say, oh, well, like spinach contains iron or tomatoes contain potassium. Well, not if it's not in the soil. Okay, they can synthesize molecules, but they can't synthesize atoms. That would require like nuclear magic. Like we don't even have that technology. So they can assemble a sugar. Okay, that's cool, but that's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They assemble that with the power of sunlight. Ta-da, simple, easy. But they can't make potassium. Okay, that's a number of protons and neutrons. They can't move those around. That's not possible. So it has to actually be in the soil. So if it's listed on the periodic table of elements, it cannot be made. There are a couple like loose almost exceptions, but generally that's a good rule. So the last category is carbon. If carbon is in soil, it's going to be dark. It's going to have plant matter. It's going to have little shredded bits of like, you know, bark and broken down plants and leaves and that kind of stuff. So if you're going to make your own just basic fertilizer, you just take a bunch of plants, trimmings, you know, leftover vegetable peels or whatever, throw it in the compost pile. If you do compost perfectly, you can break it down to the greatest stuff you've ever seen in your life in about 4 to 6 weeks. But that's with like thermometers and equipment and like pH meters and stuff. Get the pieces as small as possible, however you can, because then it's easier with the surface area to break down because bacteria and fungi need to get to the inside and they start on the outside. So the smaller the pieces, the faster you're going to go. So a lot of people use like a wood chipper or something. I don't know what you'd really have. I don't know if it would even be really worth the energy. But I mean, throw whole logs and branches in there, you're going to be waiting like 10 years. So generally, if it's green, it's nitrogen. If it's brown, it's carbon. So wood chips, almost all carbon. Just green leaves, almost all nitrogen. Thicker brown leaves, kind of in the middle. They got a little bit of structure. You need both, and generally plants are made out of plants, so I wouldn't worry about the trace elements after that. I mean, you can get a little weird, but also don't monocrop, which means don't just grow one thing. So nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, trace elements, and carbon. Those are the 5 categories of what you need, and that is as far as we're going with the chemistry lesson. So instead of just, 7 little bullet points of what to do, understanding what to do and why you're doing it, and what works at the chemical level at the very basic surface really helps you out, not just with memory, but with adapting. Because I can't tell you every little fringe thing that might happen, but if you have the knowledge, you can just make conclusions on your own and say, oh, well, because this, then that, we're going to do this instead. So the first thing you can do right now is just go get some basic, 444, 12, 12, 12, whatever, some real nice powdered fertilizer. People say don't use Miracle-Gro, don't use the synthetic stuff because organic is more durable, and as soon as you take that away, then everything dies. That's more relevant to lawns. It's just considered kind of like taking the cheating easy way out. It's unnatural, whatever, by just purists, but it's not dangerous. The resulting vegetables aren't going to kill you. It's just, I don't know, people think it's unfair. Guess what? It's a survival thing, not a growing competition. So the organic's better over time. It's a little more durable, but it's also slower and less effective. So if you've got just an end of season, buy it in fall, it's 50% off at the hardware store, some powdered stuff, cool. It's probably in a thin plastic bag or a thin plastic container. Both of those break down in heat or in sunlight. So what I would do is just glass, okay? Everything should be glass. Mason jars, wash out a pickle jar or whatever. And this stuff is stable, okay? It tends to not break down. You can pretty much store it in your garage and there is not much that's going to happen to it. It's really basic molecules, pure elements, nitrate compounds. I mean, you would need a match to break those molecules apart. So you don't have to worry about, oh man, it's going to break down over time and not be as effective. Nah, not really. So powdered stuff stored in glass, airtight, done, easy, simple. And is it explosive? Absolutely not. Even if you got gardening sulfur for very specific stuff like roses, they treat it so that it can't explode. And then you'd have to mix it with, actually I got in trouble for saying this on YouTube, 2 other things. But they put anti-explodey stuff in pretty much all of the stuff on the counter so that you can't build splodey things with it. So safe storage, not a problem. Heat safe, cold safe, freeze safe, all that. You could even have a little bit of water and moisture in it. It really isn't going to make a difference other than mold growing on it. That would be terrible because the mold would eat up some of the nutrients. So mold is kind of I break stuff down into fertilizer, like the anti-plant, but not all of it, and it's more complicated than that. So just, So if you have just a couple pounds for a couple dollars of some really good potent stuff, and just store it, you're better off than anybody else. You're good to go. Now, I'd be more concerned about the tools because you're going to get absolutely nowhere without tools. You can just take cardboard or something better, pin it down with some rocks, leave it there for 2 to 4 weeks. The grass below it will be dead and buried. It will be so much easier to turn that into farmland. It's called solarizing. But to get it really down to the roots and you're still going to be really tearing it up, it's almost like cosmetic. I'd rather just go on top of it and just dissolve it, which you can do really, really early. Do that in February, March, as soon as the ground thaws, depending upon where you live. And then you've already got nitrogen because you just broke down the grass. But the roots are going to be a problem. You really want loose soil for almost everything. Potatoes, beans. I can't even name anything that likes tight soil. Carrots love loose soil. But if your soil looks like clay, it is lacking any kind of biological matter, and you're going to need at least 50% mix by volume, or really by weight as well, of broken down plant matter. So in other words, compost, to turn that into anything that even resembles soil that you could grow in. But like I said, if it's not past the safe planting date where you live yet, but it's not frozen, and even if it is, you could just start, as soon as the snow is gone, if that even is applicable to your area, just start piling up stuff, just start composting. That doesn't care what temperature it is. I mean, the bacteria and the fungi will just stop for a little bit, and then they'll just resume when the temperature's above freezing. It's that simple. So start on your fertilizer first, prep the soil first, then when it's planting time, then you're good. Usually, at least where I live in the Midwest, very heavy north, you'd have 2 to 3 months prep time. So tools to dig up, loosen up, till up the soil, very important. You could kind of just improvise with anything, but proper tools would be a lot easier than just banging around a rock or something on your knees. That's going to be tedious, and don't burn more calories farming than you're going to grow. Just be aware of that. Use technology, use leveraging, be smart, use animals, look up old school farming techniques, really simple. But you want to get that fertilizer down there as soon as possible, but also really, really close to planting. So there is something called like some Japanese word starts with a B, I forget. But it's where you take the compost and kind of put it in like individual lines in the soil and it just breaks down perpetually. That's kind of cool. Kind of pretty low effort. I think it's called bokashi, but don't quote me on that. So that you want to start really early to give the microbes and stuff time to start breaking it down. But more time on exposed soil means weeds are going to start popping up. And wherever you live, the weeds are going to be the first up. That is how they dominated the local area. They're faster than anything else you can grow. That's why they're winning and everything else went extinct or moved to a different area. Well, you're trying to grow something that grows slower than weeds. So don't put down a bunch of fertilizer and wait 2 weeks to plant. That you're just going to feed the weeds. And they don't care about frost. They don't care about anything. Nothing will wipe them out. They're weeds. And I'm not just saying dandelions. I mean, any native species of anything, any nettle, any kind of grass, wherever you live, whatever the native species are, people consider all of them weeds when really it's just the natural environment. That just is what's already there. And what grows there the best. Speaking of that, go cut it down. You could just use a knife. You could use a scythe. You could just grab it with your hands, whatever you got to do. All the early sprout stuff, especially, that's huge. Put it in a pile, start composting. So people say, well, okay, this container, it shouldn't be bigger than this because then the surface area and then the flattening and the matting. And if it can't get oxygen and has too much of like you don't fluff it up and there's too much water, it'll go anaerobic, smell terrible, and start getting harmful bacteria in it. And so composting is kind of hard. And like I said, to get it to go fast, you got to be perfect at it. I even tried, and I had a compost pile that was like 1.5 to 2 years to have anything usable, and the top was bad and the bottom wasn't, and I didn't have a wood chipper. It was rough. So there is the express method where you go anaerobic on purpose. So get a 55-gallon drum or something close to it. I don't know, if you can cap off a bathtub, go for it. Good Lord, not in your house though, outside your house. A kid's swimming pool, I mean, like whatever you got to do. So you fill it about halfway full of water. You stuff a bunch of green stuff in it, chop it up the best you can with just little hand shears or, whatever. Get it to small bits and just let nature take its course. I would even take one little scoopful of like different soil samples and throw that in there just for the starter bacteria. I mean, they should be kind of on the surface of the plants, but not necessarily. So why not just jumpstart it with like basically a bacterial culture? So just go to your yard, the neighbor's yard, uphill, downhill, near the water, away from the water, just one little scoop each, throw that in there and yeehaw. Just throw every species possible at it and, let's go. Now this is going to create some crazy gases, so you don't want to cap it off, I believe. I've never done this because it's disgusting and dangerous, and we'll get to that, but it will go anaerobic, which means without the presence of oxygen. That is when stuff really starts breaking down quick. You got the transport highway of the water, but anaerobic bacteria is so unbelievably so much faster. It's just like all the bacteria are in like little boats instead of going on foot. Like that's what I would compare it to. That stuff is going to break down into the most vile smelling, disgusting, just rotten, rancid plant matter, but it's going to do it quicker than anything I can possibly even come up with. We're talking a couple weeks if you get the right materials, the right mix, and all that. And I think leaving it out in the sun, the warm temperatures actually help a little bit too. Some of it kills bacteria, some of it doesn't. Anaerobic, it's kind of all over the place. I would use an opaque container, like a mostly opaque white or the standard blue ones. But I've had people have good results with jet black that blocks like 99% of the sunlight. So I think it just kind of works whatever. It's just, whatever species. So man, you'll get algae, you'll get basic fungi in there. You mostly get anaerobic bacteria, and they will just start chomping at everything, completely multiplying out of control, eating all the food, which is the plants, and breaking it down into its constituent parts while off-gassing a bunch of just whatever. Stuff you really don't need. A lot of methanes, a lot of like carbon dioxide, I believe. Yeah, you don't need that. And they leave what's behind, which is carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and everything else you need. So express fertilizer. The one thing you want to avoid with all of this in anything is any soil, any plants, anything, anywhere that could have possibly in the last 2 years been treated with a broadleaf killer. So your neighbor's lawn that never has any dandelions, don't even go near it. Don't use the soil. Don't farm in it. Don't do anything. Because you'll get little sprouts, be like it's all good to go, and then they will just drop dead. And then you're in trouble because there's one growing season. So watch out for broadleaf killer. And that actually goes for farmers' fields. They use broadleaf killer in anything that is a grass. So soybeans, I believe, are not considered that, but believe it or not, corn is a grass. So you can use a broad spectrum broadleaf killer, put it all over the place, and the corn is completely unaffected. But that's why cornfields don't have anything growing in them as far as weeds. But nothing else with leaves is going to grow in it. So don't use plants grown in it. Don't use grasses near it. Just that'll poison everything. And there's no way to break it down or get rid of it. It just basically has to wash away from rainwater. So yeah. Also contaminated with salts. That's another thing. Some fertilizers can contain salt. Some plants are tolerant of it, some aren't. It's usually a farmer's field thing, but I got some contaminated stuff. So just the bags of regular topsoil, who knows what's in there. I had broadleaf killer contamination. I had salt contamination. I don't even know contamination, but stuff sure as crap didn't grow in it. So you're looking at the $12 a bag garden soil. You're looking at the $2 a bag topsoil, and you're like, well, I'll mix it. I'll mix it with my own stuff. No. Can't risk the contamination. And that goes outside of any kind of survival scenario. That's just how not to screw up your garden right now, but also keep it in mind in the future. So we got the anaerobic slurry style where you just go full blown, let's go liquid gold. The other way is generally about a 4x4 or 6x6 and then no more than about 3 feet tall usually. Just pile if you can contain it, cool. But a pile's a lot easier than building a fence for something that stupid. I mean, you want to control the water level and all that, but like whatever. I would just go with any line of bushes or trees and go right under it. Clip a little bit of branches, use that as part of it. The ones on the bottom are pretty much dead anyway. They aren't contributing to growth. It's the one higher up, closer to the sun. And then you got your little alcove. So, some nice line of arborvitaes or whatever. Some natural native bushes. You want to start your compost pile right under it so it won't get too hot in the sun and kill off all the stuff, the important microbes, but it also won't get absolutely flooded, go anaerobic, smell terrible, and become dangerous. Oh, I guess I should circle back to that. So there will be deadly harmful bacteria in that anaerobic slurry that you just made. Wash again, and then wash again and cook everything that comes out of that garden. Now, if you're doing carrots and potatoes anyway, well, carrots, I guess you could eat them raw. Potatoes, not so much, but just remember that soil is considered toxic. If you're growing lettuce in it, you're going to die. Do not use liquid homemade fertilizer on lettuce and then eat it. There is no amount of rinsing you can do. You can't really cook lettuce. You will just straight up have dysentery all summer. So just keep in mind, it is very dangerous. That is not bacteria you want anywhere near your food, but none of it can survive, being cooked and boiled like a potato for like 12 minutes. With very few exceptions involving canning, but nobody has the infrastructure to can. Nobody has enough lids. Canning is just basically a myth. It's not an ongoing durable thing, and potatoes, you just pack them in something dry, you're pretty much good for the whole winter, so not a big canning fan here. It was really something they did because they were bored back in the day, like 200, 300 years ago in America. And it was to have like a nice, interesting treat in the winter. You didn't really need it. They still had eggs. They still had potatoes. Like, they still had dry herbs and stuff. Come on. They still had animals. They had stuff in the cellars. Like, yeah, they had fermented stuff. They had jerky. They had there's so many better things to do than canning. It is such a waste of resources and difficult and easy to screw up. And then you got to worry about botulism, which multiply that by 1,000 if you made a liquid anaerobic fertilizer. So yeah. But back to the aerobic version where you want to fluff it up, take the thickest branches, but within reason, kind of make like a little net mesh and just keep it going about every 6 inches to a foot. So you want to make kind of like a nest, but it'll prop it up. So people say, well, you get all just leaves or you get all just grass clippings or whatever. They're going to mat down because they're very homogeneous. They're all the same. And if they mat down and pack down too much, they're going to break down slower, and you're not going to have the air. You're not going to have the really nice fungi. You're just going to have anaerobic crap, which dies every time it dries out. So it'll just be all over the place, switching biomes, I guess you could say, switching cultures of bacteria. I don't really know what the phrase is. And that's going to slow you way down. So if you put it under like a line of bushes or a bunch of trees or short stuff or just whatever, it's still going to get rained on, but not too much. It's going to get hit with some sunlight, but not too much. And it's going to have some structure padding it up that doesn't require you to constantly have a really expensive and specific pitchfork to sit there and fluff it and turn it and all that. because you put a little bit of, leaves and grass and green stuff and torn down weeds and whatever, and that's propped up a little bit and fluffed up automatically by the structure of the wood branches. Now, you're going to have to pull the wood branches out, I guess. I mean, have to is such a strong term, but it won't exactly be pourable powder, let's put it that way. Like the average half-inch or even quarter-inch wood branch with a little bit of bark on the outside, regardless of species, that's like 5 years to break down once that thing's underground. I mean, it is nasty. So you're going to have that structure durable for the duration of that compost, but it's also still going to be there. So you could try and snap it. You could just work around it, throw it down in the soil anyway, and it'll get there eventually. I mean, the roots will grow around it. Like, it really won't be the end of the world. I mean, certain stuff like carrots and potatoes will kind of bump into it, but just do what you can. It's like if you can pull them out, you put them in like really linear areas, you mark where they are, and then you just pull them out. Okay, nice, like almost you're building a grill. That would be kind of cool, but really you just need it there, and you need it kind of chaotic. You don't want it to necessarily be uniform. You want it to just be like a tangled mess of kind of aerated, fluffy plant matter. And then when it starts to break down, you can just kind of jump on it. You can walk on it carefully. Watch out for creepy crawlies. They love to hide in piles of that stuff. But that's going to get the airflow, the temperature, the microbes, the subterranean stuff. It's going to get the fungi spores caught in it. It's going to capture rain but not pool, and it's going to stay damp but not like flooded. And you can kind of monitor it, and the one thing I would absolutely do is just take little scoops of existing soil and just throw them in there a little tiny bit between every little layer and just every time you can. Because that's going to be your starter culture. That's going to, help the bacteria get there. Because getting them from the actual ground up into the pile is almost impossible. That's why they say constantly, like, flip it and, that kind of stuff. But if you put dirt every 6 inches, every 3 inches, or just on the top or whatever you can do, while still letting it be a little bit airy and fluffy, it's going to be able to reach that upper stuff a lot faster without having you tumble it quite as much. And then do try to turn it, just cut some kind of flat shovel looking thing or make a fork out of, well, really, I mean, if you think about it, thick tree branches pretty much grow in forks already. They usually split off into 3. So there's your pitchfork. There you go. Otherwise, you might be able to improvise something. But it's a really heavy load. You could be lifting like, 30, 50, try to lift even 100 pounds, maybe put like a lever arm on it with like a rock or a log. And man, if you got 100 pounds of compost, fantastic. Just start mixing in whatever you can make at no more than about a 50-50 ratio. No soil is bad enough that it needs above 50% compost. And plants actually won't be able to grow in 100% compost very well. I'm not going to get into why, but basically they can't stop absorbing nutrients. So if there's too much, or if there's too much bacterial stuff going on, the roots might get affected and they might get too aggressive with the roots and start, root rot and a couple other things. Just know that you can't do it. So, I mean, once again, to outline, I would have some powdered stuff just sitting there ready to go. It's basically fertilizer concentrate. It'll get you going for 1 year, and then you can get a crazy, 1+ year compost pile going. Do both, ration it, whatever you got to do. Watch the growth rates. Don't use all of it at once. Just a little bit goes a long way. And also, don't over-fertilize. You'll actually end up, nitrogen burning the plants and other such things like that. Too much fertilizer will actually kill it. So early in the season, as early as you can, go outside, safely work, and not have to dig up snow or deal with frozen ground. As soon as that is not the case, know when the earliest planting time is, which is usually Memorial Day in the far, far, far North America. So mid-May, you can look it up. It's really easy. Just like when's the frost safe date, I believe, or the earliest planting date for my zone. Just Google that or whatever. And then just write that down with like a carbon ink pen, a safety pen, a security pen, a check writing pen, whatever. Put that on some durable, thick paper and put that inside of the container of fertilizer. There you go. Now you got everything you need. And then otherwise, and additionally, go cut down everything that's coming up in early spring. All the native plants that are suited to this exact environment, go nuts. Just cut them down, pile them up, and make a whole bunch of about 4 to 6 foot wide by, about 3 to 4 tall. That's like ideal. Fluffy piles put under a tree, under a bush, just to protect it a little bit from crazy amounts of rainwater, Water it if it gets absolutely bone dry. Flip it as much as you can within reason. You don't want to disrupt it, but usually every week or two. And then in the worst case scenario, if you're really tight on time and you just got to get it going and you want to risk the very harmful, dangerous anaerobic bacteria, make the liquid stuff and just pour that all over the soil, wait a little bit, and then plant. Really, really hard to control the amounts. It's going to smell horrific and it's going to make your soil toxic. But as long as you play it safe, that is the express route. I would prep all three just in case. So that's your guide to fertilizer. I know it's a little complicated, but not really. I mean, once you kind of get the concepts, it's easier to remember something that you don't use in your daily life if you understand the why. Memory in the human brain is all about putting things together in patterns. So if you know this happens because this, and because this, because this, and this number says this because this, and this breaks down because this, and the bacteria and fungi work this way, and then it's with oxygen or without, and then the water does this. It's like this big network of like the stuff you easily remember and the stuff you don't easily remember all linked together and bring each other up in your memory. And that's why on this channel I try to teach stuff a little bit different. I don't just read off some little bullet point list. It's a 4-minute video and you don't really learn anything because you forget it all. You could write it down and like store it in your phone and cross your fingers, but like I'd rather you just gain true and sincere knowledge and then really know what you're doing, because then if one little thing I forgot to mention goes off the rails, well, then all the instructions go out the window, it stops working, and you starve and die. So, if you appreciate the really, really good educational videos with an appropriate length, and you're just, at the gym working out, and you watch a little 30-minute video that teaches you something, like, with a level of detail that you're not just like, okay, I'm not a scientist and I don't care, but so that you get a basic understanding, that's exactly the level I shoot for on this channel. So subscribe and check out more of my content. Thanks for watching, everybody. Put your best gardening and fertilizer tips down below. What worked, what didn't, and what did I leave out? I'm sure there's something. I've only been gardening for about 5 years, and I'm still not like amazing at it. But if you do want to get more into like the food stuff and like what to grow and how to grow it and how not to screw up your garden, I have a couple videos on those exact topics. The one thing I'll leave you with is don't rely on this. Grown stuff is a terrible source of food. Hunted stuff, everybody's going to be doing it, so you can forget about squirrels, rabbits, or deer. They're all gone. They'll be virtually extinct in the first year. You can raise your own stuff if you have it, but then like you got your diseases and like flus and all the stuff that you would inoculate your livestock against. So that's not realistic. Then you got poachers, you got escaping, you need fences, you got hawks, and it's very complicated. What I would rely on is for everybody else to run out of food while you're sitting there eating thousands of calories, dry goods like rice, oatmeal, and everything else that you can pack yourself for dirt cheap. That's one of my most famous videos, most viewed because it is the best. The best way to grow your own food is to not have to. Now, supplemental, cool, flavorings to herbs and stuff to make your extremely repetitive, boring food fatigue syndrome go a little bit better. Yeah, do it up. I mean, why have one method when you could have two? But somebody could just sneak in and take your whole harvest overnight. Humans, pests, animals, anything. Gardening and farming is like one of the hardest things to do, even with modern technology going back like 200 years. Go back 2,000 years and they had some tech, they had some infrastructure, they had like partnerships, they had shipping, they had roads. I mean, even farming in Africa was pretty industrialized. If you think, oh, I'm a master gardener and I'm just going to grow everything. No, you're not. You resort to some pesticides. You resort to stuff that you can't just go get, even if it's all natural. I mean, where are you going to go get like fossilized, chopped up crustacean shells to kill anything with a carapace? Like, where are you going to go get that? It's at the bottom of the ocean. You might think you're great until you can't go to the hardware store. If you had to do it all on your own, your garden would fail. I don't care how good you are. So this is like the backup plan. This is the long-term plan. This is the we're just going to do it and try it. But you got to have those staples. Okay, don't just say, I bought seeds and those are easier and smaller. Yay, I'm good forever. I'm not going to do anything else. No. You got to have like 100 kilos of rice sitting around, just saying. And you can get that done with Mylar and a sealer for like $50. And you've got months worth of food. You don't have to go outside. You don't have to attract attention. You don't have to worry about thieves. You don't have to sit there and work out in the hot sun, transport water. None of that. So the best solution to farming and gardening is don't do it. But now you also know about fertilizer. So, hey, hate to leave it on a downer, but, I'm realistic. You gotta look at the bigger picture here. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time.